this because I'm in the issue, but I still felt like beating you guys over the head with my poetry by reading it to you out loud. All right. Oh, that is someone else's poem. Oh, okay, there we are. Not tall enough. Let's see that. Okay. In a land bereft of fortune, oppressed by a dreadful mage, a blacksmith named Thomas of Hillshire could no longer contain his rage. For too long his people had suffered under Grislock's iniquitous rule. Thomas decided to take a stand, though many thought him a fool. He kissed his mother farewell, paid respects at his father's tomb, and set out on a perilous journey to sneer in the face of doom. At the foot of Mount Mortunitas, he produced his trusty pick and began to mount one rock at a time up a cliff most hard and slick. The frost bit hungrily at his face, the icy crags wore at his grip, but Thomas thought of his village, and his hands refused to slip. When at last he mounted the peak, Thomas could not catch his breath, for if he tarried for but a moment, he would surely freeze to death. He found a ring of nullifying stones that disrupted the arts arcane. If his ritual were interrupted, Grislock's powers would surely wane. He selected one of perfect shape, but when he picked it up, he groaned. Though small, it nearly doubled the weight of the meager things he owned. Thomas went back down the mountain as methodically as he ascended, for if his balance were to falter, his journey would have ended. Onward he lurched through the forest of woe, where the trees stared at him remorsefully. Their gazes sought to pierce his soul, but he covered his eyes resourcefully. Alas, he could not see his path, and wandered in random directions. Much tripping and falling and stubbing of toes was endured in this journey's section. At last he arrived at Grislock's lair, where the sky was set ablaze. The sweat dripped down across his face as he solved a deadly maze. And when he came to mahogany doors, which were seared by twisted flame, he calmed his nerves and gathered his wits, prepared to play a deadly game. He burst through the portal gallantly, interrupting a most wicked rite. The untold suffering of millions would end this very night. The mage wasted nary a moment, assuming a perverted form, with slightly more eyes, teeth, and appendages than could be considered the norm. The ghastly foul apparition leapt toward him with precision, and lifted him off the ground with flagella as it constricted him with derision. Thomas summoned the reserves of his courage as the air was squeezed from his lungs. His energy was sapped by his trials, but the last of his song was not sung. He reached into his burlap sack and produced some iron filings, which he threw toward the otherworldly mass of flesh in dreadful pilings. He could not say what orifice had made the creature sore. Nonetheless, it recoiled and lay in pain upon the floor. Seizing the moment of weakness, Thomas dashed to the swirling ring of darkened stones and forbidden gems that Grislock called his magic bling. Thomas of Hillshire grunted and strained as he hoisted the nullifying stone. He placed it into the circle as the room glimmered and shone. A celestial light-clad angel that smelled of honey and rose descended from the ceiling and whacked Thomas on the nose. "You simpleton," it sneered at him. "This bauble will not break the hex. I asked you to bring a concave gem, and this one is clearly convex. How many times must I tell you? How could you have forgot? If you cannot follow my directions, then your struggles have been for naught. You must make your escape at once before he regains his strength, and return with a different jewel of a proper width and length." As Thomas stepped across the mage, it spoke from its putrid maw. "Next time you come to stop me, I'll turn your face to slaw." Thomas limped off into the woods, drained, exhausted, and meek. He'd need all the rest he could get to do this again next week.
Adam Rinsky, everybody.